Hey there, biologists! In this set of notes, we are going to be learning about the structure and function of the cell membrane. But let's first start by recapping what we've been learning about cells and their environments. As we've learned, cells have a lot going on inside of them. For example, we've learned that eukaryotic cells, such as animals and plants, have many organelles inside of them that all do different functions. Furthermore, cells aren't isolated little worlds. They have to interact with other cells and molecules in their environment by absorbing molecules or releasing molecules. And if these cells build a multicellular organism such as you and I, they also play an important role in helping the whole organism function. For example, one cell builds many cells build tissues, tissues build organs, which build organ systems, and then make the whole organism work. So how exactly do cells do this? How do they maintain homeostasis, and how do they help an organism function? It all has to do with cell transport. In order for cells to maintain a balanced, stable environment inside and outside the cell, they must have some control over what can enter and leave. One very important cell structure that all cell types has the responsibility of acting like a fence or gatekeeper, determining what can enter the cell and leave. Do you know what this structure is? Hopefully you recognize that this structure must be some kind of outer layer of the cell, and that structure is the cell membrane. So we'll be talking about the cell membrane today. You've also learned that, you might not have learned that the cell membrane can also be called the plasma membrane. So learning target 1, we are going to describe and illustrate the function and structure of the selectively permeable cell membrane. The cell membrane helps control what enters and leaves the cell. It helps give the cell its shape. It communicates with other cells. For example, you have lots of different types of cells in your body that need to interact with each other, such as the white blood cells of your immune system, which need to frequently determine if your cells are friend or foe. And they do that by communicating with their cell membrane. As we mentioned, all cell types have a cell membrane. This includes bacteria, animals, and plant cells. So if you take a look at this illustration, you can see this is the animal cell example, where we have kind of an oval-shaped cell, and we have structures inside of it, so we know that it isn't a bacterial cell. And if you zoom into that outer layer that we've drawn as a solid line, it actually has a lot more going on than it being just a solid line. Here's a cool microscopy image of a cell membrane. The cell membrane is made up of many structures called phospholipids. So imagine that this whole thing is a cell, and if we cut part of it out to look at what's inside, the inside of the cell is here, so this is where the cytoplasm would be, the nucleus, and all of the organelles. And this cell membrane, again, that we've always drawn as just a solid line, actually has a lot more detail to it. And you can see all of these little structures that kind of look like balloons that make up this cell membrane. These structures are called phospholipids. Let's break it down in half. One part of the phospholipid represents an area of the molecule that has a phosphate group, which basically means that there's a phosphorus atom surrounded by oxygen atoms. This area of the molecule likes being near water, which means it is called hydrophilic. The prefix hydro means water, and the prefix philic means likes. So this area that I think looks like a balloon, I call this the head region. So imagine there's a smiley face here. It's the head region of this molecule. And it is hydrophilic. It likes being near water. So if you think about the cell and its environment, there's water outside the cell and inside the cell. So these balloon structures will organize themselves so that they are pointing out towards the water molecules on each side of the cell. Let's talk about the second part of a phospholipid. The second part is called a lipid, which means that it is made of fatty acid molecules. In our chemistry unit, we learned that lipids are fats. So this is a fatty region of the molecule. This part of the molecule hates being near water molecules, so it is called hydrophobic. Again, hydro meaning water. When you think about phobic, think phobia. For example, some people are phobic of spiders, so that would be arachnophobia. So phobic means fear of or dislike of, and this hydro means that it's referring to water. So these two tails, so think of a balloon having two strings tied to it, and these two strings are called the lipid tails, and they are hydrophobic. So these are the hydrophobic tails. What do you notice about how these phospholipids are arranged? Well, remember that the balloon part, the phospholipid head, that is hydrophilic, they arrange themselves so that they are always exposed to water on each side. And that allows the tails that do not like being next to water to isolate themselves away from water molecules. So you can see that there are layers of these phospholipids. And in fact, there are two layers. So the cell membrane is called a phospholipid bilayer. The prefix bi means two, and layer referring to the fact that there's two layers of these molecules. So they're arranged so that the tails are facing each other and so that the balloon heads are sticking out towards water. Cell membranes are what we call selectively permeable. Selectively permeable, well, let's break that down. So selective permeable means that the membrane is selective or picky about what can permeate or enter or leave the cell. So for example, I'm selective about the food I eat. That means I'm picky about what I eat. And the cell membrane is the same way. It is picky about what can go through it. Some molecules can easily move in and out of the cell between the phospholipids that build that membrane. The types of molecules that can squeeze between the phospholipids are either small molecules or they might be uncharged. Here are some examples. You can see that oxygen gas is here, carbon dioxide gas, so some examples would be oxygen gas or O2, and carbon dioxide gas, CO2. You also have water, glycerol, ethanol, and nitrogen. So these are examples of small uncharged molecules that can squeeze between the phospholipids to go from one side of the cell to the other. One way to think about the cell membrane is like a chain link fence. So a chain link fence, when you push that chain link, it's kind of flexible, but it stands up on its own. And there are little openings between the chains in the fence. So if you think about, say you have a couple of different sized balls. You might have a bouncy ball, a baseball, and a beach ball. If you were to throw these at the chain link fence, it's more likely that the bouncy ball will be able to squeeze between these spaces. So if you throw them, which one would be more likely to go through? Probably the bouncy ball. So think of this cell membrane as like a chain link fence, where really small things can squeeze between these spaces, but really big things cannot pass between those spaces, as shown in this picture. So we have small things that can go between, but big things bounce off. So how exactly do large molecules enter or leave the cell if they can't squeeze between the phospholipids? For example, what happens when you eat sugar? How does the sugar that's floating around in your stomach enter the cells of your stomach to be broken down? The structure that does this is called the protein channel. Protein channels are molecules that are embedded in the cell membrane, and they act like bridges or gates to move the following molecules in or out of a cell. Large molecules, as mentioned, like the beach ball, or charged molecules. Examples would be glucose and proteins. So imagine you have a really large molecule, like a beach ball. You need to have some kind of gate or bridge that allows that molecule to go in and out of the cell. So imagine if we were to go back to our chain link fence analogy, a protein channel is like a gate that you can open and close that would allow a larger molecule or a beach ball to go through. All right, let's practice what you've learned. So match the part of the phospholipid to the description. So here's one whole phospholipid. Which part of this phospholipid, A or B, would be the tails? which part would be the head? Which part of this phospholipid likes being next to water? You can use this picture for help if you need to. And what part of this phospholipid hates water? Let's check your answers. The tails would be B. The head would be A. A also happens to be the part that likes water. As you can see here, there's water outside and inside the cell, and that's where these balloon structures are arranged. And B is the region that hates water or is phobic of water. What types of molecules can squeeze between the phospholipids? Think about your chain link fence analogy and different sizes of balls. Remember that really small molecules can sneak between the phospholipids to go from one side to the other, whereas really big molecules need what's called a protein channel to go across. I have created a quizzes for you to use to practice what you've been learning in this set of notes. Your goal is to achieve at least 80% on this quizzes, and you will earn full credit if you get 80% or above, and you'll get partial credit if you earn 50% to 80%. So at the very least, you need to earn 50% to earn partial credit on the quizzes assignment. Send me a message if you have questions. Take care. Bye.